how to make a jewellery tree. It looks brilliant anywhere in the house and can be designed with your own unique flair. Today's project actually started in the mangroves. We came down to look for an old dead tree that would be perfect for our jewellery display project. Our neighbour had also mentioned a couple of logs he was no longer in need of, so we stopped by his block and found this piece. We needed something like this for a few other projects, and this would also work really well for the base of the jewellery tree. In the ute, and it's time to get back to the shed. Before we got started, Grandad had to sharpen the chainsaw. It's a pretty interesting process. This little shaving tool is what's used, and you essentially go along the whole chain. It makes cutting logs far more easier for things like this. So we've got that big log from our neighbour's block, vice grip to the bench, and we want to cut off about 20 centimetres. We'll lose a tiny bit of this to sanding, but it's a good size to have as a base. We'll then give this a really good sand on both sides, smoothing up those rough edges and getting it prepped to go on the lathe. The thing about the lathe is, you need to make something that attaches to your project and to the base plate of the lathe, something in the middle. We're just using a piece of wood and we'll just call this the connector to help. And you can see Grandad here tracing around the base plate with a pencil to get the right size. We can then take that over to the bandsaw and cut that out along the line. So now we've got our jewellery tree base, our connector, and our base plate. The next job here is to attach all three of these together, so we can jump onto the lathe to create a bowl in the jewellery tree base. There's a pretty cool trick using a good glue to go to your connector and your base. But you take a piece of newspaper or magazine and it actually goes between these two. You'll see why this is important later on when we want to separate the connector and the base. Once it's glued, we vice grip it together and leave it to dry for 24 hours. It's also the hottest part of the year here in the Kimberley, with the top of 40 degrees Celsius almost every day for weeks. So we're not really able to work on any projects until the afternoon. Now that the glue is dried, we can remove the vice grips, take out the lathe base plate and screw it into the connector. Grandad cuts a piece off the tree and it's now time for me to get trimming and sculpting this branch to hold a range of different jewellery. I'm wanting it to look relatively clean, so I'm really just taking off any little pieces that aren't quite strong enough to hold a piece of jewellery. Alrighty, now for the fun part. This is the wood lathe, and as Grandad told me, this one's powered by a washing machine motor from the 1980s, but it still runs well. So the lathe essentially spins the base extremely fast, and we can set up a tool guard and use this speed and a carving tool to carve out a bowl. Now this log is quite a hard piece of wood. There's definitely more softer wood out there, but we're just going with what we've got. It's a pretty satisfying process to watch. I decided to give it a go, but I must say Grandad is far more better. Once we're happy with how the bowl is looking, we can run some sandpaper over it to make sure it's nice and smooth. Take it off the lathe, unscrew the base plate, and now back to that piece of paper. We can take a chisel and a hammer, and when we hit it down, it separates perfectly. Without the piece of paper, we wouldn't get that nice clean and flush break between the base and the connector. It's a pretty cool trick. We can then sand off the paper and also go around the edges to clean up that circle a little bit more. We are almost done. We're just doing a quick check and it's looking really nice so far. We can then give the base a good spray and a good coat of lacquer. It's a nice finish to create that seal as well as bring out that beautiful colour. A similar effect can also be achieved by wiping down the wood with oil and a rag. Because the tree isn't symmetrical, we'll just sand that as well as make it a bit more round. And then Grandad can measure the circumference of the branch, and that can be used to find the right drill bit. We then simply drill a hole right in the middle. And thankfully the branch fits perfectly inside. Secure that with glue and wipe off the excess. And our final step in this process is to give the branch a good spray as well. And as a bit of a final touch, Grandad attached some of those sticky felt dots underneath so it doesn't scratch the surface that it sits on. Grandad's part is done. I can now jump in with some jewellery and get decorating. I very much have a passion for interior design and the aesthetics of a place. Although I don't have a heap of jewellery, I did collect some during my time in Sydney. And what's most interesting about this display project is that it really is the location and how you dress it that makes it what it is. We made this in a back shed, but something like this would look brilliant in an art gallery, shop front, or in the bedroom. Even just dressing up the table around it, you can see how much it transforms the jewellery tree. And I think that's what I enjoy so much about art. Thank you so much for watching. You've been with me, Outback Tom, and Outback Grandad. If you'd like to see us build something else, you can always let us know in the comments below. Don't forget, you can always support us by liking and subscribing. Thanks you mob, we'll see you soon.